Welcome to Discover Energy Work. Today I'm with Kate White, and Kate is a craniosacral, biodynamic craniosacral therapist who's working with the very special development of the embryo and the embryo of humans. And it's incredible. I'm fascinated to hear everything that happens in this incredible process. Good morning, Kate. How are you today?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks for asking me on your podcast, Richard. I'm very excited.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because I met you. You're posting an ad on Anatomy Training, which is a group I run in Facebook, and the advertisement it really resonated with me because I think we often forget that so much of our development, our physical development, you might say like 80% of our physical development happens in the womb. I don't know if it's 80, I'm just making that number up. Do you have a percentage of how much of our development actually happens inside the womb?
I'd say it's all there, except for some of the nervous system development and organ development continues a little bit once we get outside the womb. But a lot of our neuroanatomy and all our physiology are there. But we do continue to add neurons as we grow, but I think it's mostly there. I can't remember. I don't have an exact percentage.
Right. I mean, I think if we think we're starting with a single cell, and then we've got a whole body by the time we come out, and yes, okay, we can't walk and talk and everything else, but I mean, like that's pretty massive, isn't it? But
yes.
You know what I'm really interested in is I'm interested in your story and how you got there, which I know a little bit about. So how do you describe yourself to people today? How do you introduce yourself?
Well, that's a really good question, actually. That's a good question. I mean, I work with pre and perinatal somatic therapy. I work with our earliest experiences, how we come into form as a spirit into matter, and then our earliest experiences as babies and how we come into relationship with our parents, and then we grow. So I specialize in implicit somatic memory, repair, recovery, restoration. It's like starting preconception up to about 18 months, 2 years of life.
Right. Okay. Well, I feel like I want to talk about those things.
Okay.
But I feel like we need to first kind of understand your journey so that people could, in a way, understand what you're all about. Because like, you don't choose something like this. You don't go to university and your major is systemic repair of implicit memory in the embryonic phase. It's like nobody does that. Yeah. So what happened? I mean, you must have been, I think you started as a body worker, was it?
Yes, I started out as a massage therapist, and that was many years ago, but I specialized in helping care for pregnant women and their babies. And I had been an international health worker and traveled around the world before I became a massage therapist, helping with baby care, maternity, obstetrics, helping improve clinical practice, especially in Africa. And then I came back to the US and wanted to continue, and it was either massage therapy school or become a doctor. And I chose massage therapy, and I just went deeper and deeper into body work. And in 1999, I had just graduated from my biodynamic craniosacral training, which is it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I mean, you really have to be very still in your body, listen very deeply to your own rhythms, your own fluid rhythms. And these rhythms are deeply connected to how we develop in utero. And it's based on osteopathy, and it's also a deeply spiritual practice. At least that's how it was taught and how people understood it, because our formative the forces that help form us are the old osteopaths called them the breath of life. So
well, this is going back to Sutherland, isn't it? He developed
yes,
the craniosacral therapy, and what I understand was when he first felt the craniosacral rhythm, he thought it was God entering the body, or you know, the universal life force entering the body. He was so impressed and in awe of this thing that he's like, wow, this is amazing. So yes, I think, you know, if you're going back to Andrew Taylor Still and Sutherland, then these are really, well, apparently, speaking to a friend who was one of the on the board of directors, I'm not sure if that's right, in the Osteopathic Association in Hong Kong, and she said, oh, you know, Sutherland was into angels and you know, God very much, and all that's been taken out, and it's all very technical now. But actually, you know, he was a deeply spiritual person, and then Sutherland brought in this whole aspect of the craniosacral rhythm, which is amazing. And now that's been developed, and it's now, you can say, it's its own branch of bodywork.
Yes. Well,
wow.
in
So it
our
really
country,
moved you. I mean, it changed you as a person.
Yes, I didn't anticipate that. I mean, I was just following one of my teachers who went to study with Franklin Sills in England, and he said, just study this. I'm teaching this now. And I'm like, oh, okay. And one of the things we're taught in that is just the impact of birth, especially on the cranium. And so you're taught how to, you know, how to help a person who's had an overwhelming birth. It was part of our training. I mean, there are 10 modules. It was one module. And so I, you know, had developed a whole clinical intake. And one of my questions was, well, what do you know about your birth? And I had just graduated, and I just had my first baby, actually. This was in 1999. And I had a woman that was referred to me by her psychotherapist for body work, and she filled out my my intake form, and then she said, she came back, you know, her second visit, and said, you know, that question that you asked about my birth, you know, I think my birth is the reason why I have lifelong depression, and I want to heal it, and I want to heal it with you. And this was, you know, 20 years ago, 21 years ago now. And I said, sure, you know, I didn't know much about that. I knew I'd been trained to recognize birth patterns. But her story was really unique. And she was in her 50s at the time. So I'm guessing she'd be in her 80s now, maybe. And so her story was that she was a big breech baby in the 30s. And when her mother went into labor.
Breech means that the head wasn't pointing down, but it was actually pointing up. Yeah. Whilst the baby is still in the uterus.
Yes. I mean, it's a rare birth position. It's only 3% of us in the United States are breech, and we have fairly high breech percentages. Most countries don't have as high. We have a tendency towards multiples in this country, and many places do have multiples too, but for some reason we have a fairly high breech rate. And well, anyway, we don't even give mothers a chance to have breech babies now. They're C-section. Breech position is it's a dangerous way to be born, very painful way to be born, and many women lose their babies in the breech.
Yes.
So she was a breech, and her mother started to hemorrhage while she was giving birth to her. And the word went out to the waiting room that mother and baby were going to die. So this is the story she told me. You know, she was there in the flesh, doing quite well, but lifelong depression associated, in her opinion, with this experience. So
Right. And that was like, I mean, just to clarify for people, depression isn't feeling sad. It's feeling exhausted, feeling like just unable to do things, and feeling like you just don't have enough energy.
Well, some despair and hopelessness. And so so her father in the waiting room got down on his knees and began to pray. And a nun appeared beside him and prayed with him. And she, my client, the baby, turned herself around in utero and was born head first and saved her mother's life, saved her life. She stopped the bleeding and she was born. And she said to me, okay, I want to heal this. So I'm like, okay. I held her in the craniosacral therapy. I didn't know that people could do this kind of thing. You know, really, I suspected that there was residue, but I just followed what I was taught. And while I was holding her, she did a lot of processing about how her feet were in her way or her feet were a problem. And I just held her in the craniosacral, which is a deep healing. I mean, you can really make a difference in someone's life with the cranial work, allowing the health in someone's body to ignite and rise and manifest. So I started having panic attacks while I was holding her.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, what is this? This is, I don't understand this at all. So I called up the only person I knew who knew anything about it. And his name was William Emerson. And he is a pioneer in birth psychology. I had just met him at a conference and he said, well, why is this happening? And I'm like, well, I don't know. I thought you could tell me. And so he began to ask me questions about my own birth. And it turns out that I was also a breech baby.
Wow.
And I also had a near-death experience at birth. And her birth experience was igniting the memory of my birth experience. Right. And that got me so curious. I'm like, how could that happen? What is that? And so I became very passionate. And now 21 years later, you know, I've created an awful lot of programs and teaching people, and I'm have studied with so many people trying to really just absorb and be with this material. I love it so much.
It sounds, I mean, I think it's fascinating. I sort of want to say, if that's the correct, if there's no misunderstanding, I don't want to let you off the hook so easily.
Oh.
Because the experience of then going back and healing your own birth, what was that like? Because you must have...
it was terrifying at first.
Right.
And, you know, that was back in the day when we're still trying to figure out how to do it. And many people, pioneers in the field, would use regression therapies. And so holotropic breath work was one of those, and that's Stan Groff. And then Barbara Van Dyson and a few others. I mean, Frank Lake, William Emerson, these are all pioneers, developed a fairly intense form of regression therapy. And I ended up studying with William and then one of his students, Carlton Terry. And that was back when we thought catharsis was a good idea.
Right.
And it still is for some people, but there's much more subtle tools now that we have. And anyway, so I just engaged in trying to understand my experience. And it was terrifying to you know, be born and remember those imprints. For me, as a breech baby, I've suffered a lot in the breech delivery. But after being born a lot and really understanding my own experience, I have integrated that. And now I got to go into the good stuff, the deeper levels of understanding our true essence and who we really are as humans. And I'm just now really beginning to flower, I think, with all that I know. It's taken me 21 years.
Well, Nobody's counting.
Well, I am, because I'm like,
Right.
I don't want people to take 21 years to get to the beauty of us underneath all that, you know?
Totally. I mean, Kate, let me ask you, like, so you went back into the breach, as it were. You know, it's almost, into the breach
That's a,
once more, dear friends. Yeah, isn't that a
oh, wow. That
famous
sounds
line
really
from a
good.
poem? You went back into this traumatic situation, and I'm imagining, if we're thinking about the different, there's Freud's model of how the energy develops, and then there's Erickson's psychosocial model, that a basic, they kind of start at birth, but, once we're out of the body, but in theory, our human development does begin before that. Did you find that you kind of like you were coming apart as this process was going on, or did you just feel you felt okay?
Well, I mean, at first, like I said, it was frightening. And I don't think they really knew how to really gently bring someone into their experience until much later. I met other teachers whom I thought did a much better job. One of them was Ray Castellino. And it's not like they did a better job. They had just developed better tools. And that's the way of it,
Right.
when we have something, people grow because of the pioneers standing on their shoulders. Ray is a remarkable practitioner. And then I met Anna Chitty and John Chitty. John was my primary mentor for many years, and there's a craniosacral polarity teacher who loved babies. But so I began to really study working with babies. And after holding people for years and wanting to help them, you want to get into prevention. So I've always loved mothers and babies. That was my passion. So I began to work to help babies. But did I come apart? No. But
No.
I can tell you that it was quite difficult. And then once I got to the prenatal stage, when we're in utero, I'm like, oh, this is amazing. This is incredible. And I've gotten into the very minutia of who we are and how we make our bodies and what that's like. And it's so amazing. It's empowering. And you can find the deep beauty of who we are by studying embryology and understanding how we make our bodies and
Well,
the
you're lighting
mystery
up. I
and
mean, as you're
magic.
just talking about it, you're lighting up. I mean, it's beautiful. There's a big growing gentleness that just like appears when you start talking about it. It's really nice.
Yes.
And do you find, like, since you've gone through this process yourself, that you've changed as a person?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've gotten much happier, and I've gotten just falling in love with the work of it and babies, helping mothers and babies. And I think I've just gotten more expansive and happier. I don't suffer so much, and I don't I used to suffer a lot more, and just internally, my own perception of myself. And I still, can fall into that, but my love for the work has grown so much that it sort of bleeds me now. And you're right, it is an incredible thing to think that we make our bodies, almost all of in utero, and we do that in relationship with our mother, but we do it also in relationship with our true essence, and a lot of wonderful, mysterious, original, instructions of how we manifest and make our bodies. And all our neurons are made, before we're born, and then as we grow, we can make new ones. But we have like billions of neurons in our brain before they start to completely synapse and create neural networks. And we do everything in utero that we do outside the womb, except for we don't breathe air through our lungs, but we practice breathing and eating and moving and And then as babies and as in utero or preborn babies, we're very spiritual beings. And
So you think,
babies are too.
yeah, sure. There's this, the philtrum, like where the nose goes down to the lip.
Mm-hmm.
They say that we actually got that because somebody presses a finger on our lips to say, don't remember anything from before you're born. Yeah. But actually some people have come through and they've had full memories of that whole process, which is kind of like amazing. And it's difficult for us to comprehend, in all honesty, because we don't have that experience. But I'd kind of like to ask you if you've had any stories of people that have come to you with other problems, or the most amazing stories and transformations in is it 20 years of 21 years?
Oh yes. Oh yes. I mean, I have many stories. Like what kind of story do you want to hear?
Your best, the one you say for a Sunday evening. I put on my best clothes and.
Oh, okay. Well, I can tell you a few. I mean, I was working with one this afternoon. I do a lot of. I have teaching stories now. I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
And I like to tell this story because I just think it illustrates the best of working with adults. Now, I have a lot of stories of working with babies and mothers too. But this story I like to tell, I think it's one of the best. I have several really dramatic ones, but this one I think is subtle but deep and very beautiful. So there was a man that came to see me. He heard about me, and he lived pretty far away. He was a visiting scholar, so he was studying at a university about an hour and a half from me, and heard about somatic experiencing. So that's my area of specialty, which is somatic experiencing combined with the craniosacral therapy and pre and perinatal healing. It's a kind of a felt sense sort of trauma healing therapy. And now over 10,000 people around the world are trained in that. Well, he had heard about it and he wanted to come and try it out. So he would drive once a week or once every other week to see me. And he was the most beautiful man. He was a minister, very peaceful, gentle man, young. And he just had his second baby. And his second baby was born, with a congenital defect and cried a lot. And he said that he would get enraged when she would cry, and he felt really ashamed of that and wanted to heal it because he was a minister and really a very peaceful man. So he came, and what we did was that the first thing I have ways I can show people the layers of experience of someone, because that's really key. You have to understand that we develop in layers, and starting with conception, I usually get the story. Now I start preconception, but so with this man, his story was that his father was a prisoner of war during the wars in Europe as a boy. He was sort of shipped from POW camp to POW camp and was very traumatized. So the way he handled his stress was he drank a lot, and he was an alcoholic. So his mother, the way that she would appease him, because he would get drunk and rage, is that she would have sex with him. And that's how a lot of the children in his family were conceived. And they weren't very wealthy. And his father was an alcoholic. And then the brother that was before him died when he was young, when he was a baby. So those are layers of experience. So just begin to track. So this is the culture of the family. This is what happened before he got there. He had two older sisters, a brother who died, and then he was conceived. And often when mothers they lose a baby, they're very, very anxious. Or they don't connect with the baby. And it's just very difficult because of the pain of losing a baby. It's the worst pain on the planet. So this happened before him. So when he was born, his mother told him, you are a gift from God, really. And but then he got very ill and was hospitalized as a baby. And so that's another layer. So that's hard when you're a baby. And back then, often this man, I think, was in his early 30s when he came to see me. They separated mothers and babies, and that's very hard. And then he wasn't touched for a period of time. And so he had these amazing challenges before he was 2 years old.
Yeah.
And so when he came to see me, he was saying, I just start to rage when my little girl cries. So when we're working with a parent that has that, we get their history and we try and understand what his adaptation to his life was. Often when a child enters into the life of a parent, what triggers the parent is something that they have that is not healed. So it's quite likely that he had a fearful part of him that was connected to his own life experience. And so we unpacked that. And we did a lot of work with a part of him that was very frightened of his father, and a part of him that had taken his father in, and a part of him that was still a baby, had a baby part that still needed to be integrated, which we did. We did all that. And then toward the end of his time with me, I asked him if he would be willing to connect with who he was before he came into form. So preconception. And he said, okay. And he sat very quietly on my couch. And he said, I feel like I am a golden ball of light being held by a benevolent being. And this is a minister. So he had a good sense of spiritual life, and had really created a whole new life for himself in religious community, which he was a young leader in that community. And it gave him like a lot of comfort to remember who he was before he came into form. So then I asked him if he'd be willing just to float over where he was conceived and consider what drew him into form. What drew him in? And he said, oh, I don't want to. It's too scary. I mean, his early life was really frightening. So I said, okay, I put him on the table. I'm a body worker, and I did the craniosacral therapy. It was very quiet. It was in the evening. My little room where I work just glowed with a nice warm light. It's a beautiful place to work. The sun was down by the time we almost completed. And so I asked him again while he was on the table if he'd be willing to just float over where he was conceived and sense what drew him into form. And so he said he would. So he said, I'm floating over my home, looking down, and I see such beauty. The land is so beautiful. And he said, I see open spaces and fresh air, and I feel a sense of opportunity. And then I say, yes, and I jump. And so he jumped down into his, form, into his cell, one cell of the ovum and the sperm together. There he was. And I asked him, if he could look around in his life now, is there a way that pattern still is here of what drew him into form? And he thought about it, and he said, yes. Like right now here in Virginia with you, Kate, here in this beautiful land, I see a lot of beautiful nature, open spaces, fresh air, opportunity, and I feel that, yes.
Wow.
And when he got up off the table, I sat with him and I said to him, because you are someone who studies spiritual life, that wasn't it Jesus who said the kingdom of heaven is here on earth? And he looked at me and he said, Kate, I feel such peace in my heart. And I feel such forgiveness for my parents. And that was the last time I saw him. So I feel like that's the kind of thing that's possible in the realm of the work that I do. for people to connect to who they really are, to connect to their spiritual essence, to find their purpose on earth, to heal these early frightening places that happen for us as babies and children. And they happen sometimes even before we can remember, but our body remembers. And so my work has become about studying our somatic patterns, how we develop, and what are the forces that support us. And it's been wonderful. And I recommend anybody to begin to see, because once you see the world through the eyes of the baby, there's no going back. It's a whole different view.
Well, I think we all have. I think it's like once you've gone back and seen the eyes, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
we've all been babies, but like I think, you know, there's a loss of innocence, isn't there, that we go through, and a sort of hardening.
That's right.
Yeah, but you seem like I was going to say that almost like a reverse midwife. You're getting us back. We're trying to go out of the womb, and you're saying no. You're going back. You got to go back in there. There's some things you didn't do properly, or then your fault. But this needs to be cleared because you've got this amazing potential that's caught up in some things, which it's a lovely. For me, that's a lovely image, like a reverse midwife.
That's true. But you don't go back in, you sort of stay present, but you integrate these parts. You integrate your experiences. They get illuminated.
Right.
And then
I can imagine like the thought of going back in would be scary for some people, like going back into a hole. So you're saying that you guide people in a safe space, and you accompany them the whole time and help them. Yeah.
Yes, you can integrate the experiences if they haven't been seen or felt or heard. And that's what babies do, you know. When they come out, they try and tell you about their experience, and many people don't know how to hear it. But I do. I've been trained, and it's been a long journey to learn. And now I'm wanting to train people. But
that's what you're doing. I mean, that's what attracted me. First of all, was I'm sitting on my group as the moderator, you know, sitting by Facebook, waiting for somebody to post something, which is not true. I'm so busy doing other things. But I saw your post, and it was like, I'm quite strict because people post, you know, all kinds of things on there, and I just go, well, look, if it's an anatomy training group, I don't want to hear there's somebody's dancing or doing an exercise. You must include the anatomy. And I can't remember if you did, but maybe I broke my own rule, but I was just so enamored by your post and the whole concept that people tend to think the anatomy starts now, but it doesn't. It starts way, way, way back. And of course, our mind and our spirit is so connected, and that goes way, way, way back. And so if you're doing this kind of work, and especially when there's been trauma, I mean, it's just wonderful. And to train more people. But so you train them on somatic therapy, somatic experiencing?
Well, I have my own bodywork sequence I teach called Somatic Wholeness. I teach frontline birth workers also an integrated kind of midwifery model that includes the baby's experience. I teach with the midwife. But the workshop that you saw is one that I'm promoting. It's the work of Jaap van der Wal, who's I think he's Dutch. He's from the Netherlands. And he teaches a combination of anthroposophy, which is the Waldorf approach to understanding our development.
Yes.
And Andrew Still and Randolph Stone, who is an amazing polarity pioneer and just amazing therapist, a magical person, really.
Mm.
And so he teaches how we are a polarity, like we are magical. We come into being because of these opposites, the egg and the sperm. They're just opposites.
Mm.
And but their polarity is not like opposite. They have a relationship, and together they create a third, which is us. And he says, our soul, our body comes from our soul. We make our body.
Mm.
And he's the one, he's an anatomist, he's a medical anatomist. And that is all he teaches. He teaches anatomy. He teaches spiritual anatomy
Mm.
of the embryo and how we develop and the amazing journey of us as we come in. And that's that place of the egg and sperm, and starting there with our development and how we are whole, and then we fall into parts that become us,
Mm.
our organs, our skin, our face, our hands, and all. I mean, it's just the most breathtaking thing for me. So I'm wanting people to take his course. He's offering it online for the first time.
Oh, so
And of course
you're publicizing his course, and I was just so
I
excited
am.
about you, and that's so funny. But well, that's good. I mean, I'm happy to help with that. That sounds wonderful. And I can just, like, I'm a body worker myself, and I can confirm, because I learned with a Tai Chi master, Wu Wei master in China many years, and then I studied with him in Germany and so on, and really that idea of the polarities being one, that is Tai Chi. The polarities are polarities, but they are one. That's
yes,
the definition of Tai Chi. Not the shadow boxing, that's Tai Chi Chuan, but this concept is Tai Chi. But what I noticed was, at least in myself, was there was this inner resistance to really living that. And then I started, like a few years ago, going, well, what happens if I work the energy first and then work the body? And I found that if you work the energy first, the structures follow the energy. It's not the other way around. If you don't change the energy, you're actually, you're whistling in the wind, as it were. Like there's nothing, it's going to have no effect. You're not going to be noticed. If you change the energetic structures, the body will actually, often it just heals itself. You don't need to do anything.
Yeah.
And if you've got the knowledge, you can speed up the process. But it's pretty amazing. Yeah. And now with lockdown, well, there's not a lot of body work going on right now. So you can just work on the energy.
Right. Well, Randolph Stone said that we step down into creation. So we were energy first. And as we come in, there's a vortex, that, we come in ignited. We ignite the sort of midline. And I'm not a polarity person. I mean, I know some of it. I'm a craniosacral therapist, but I love this notion of that we're drawn into form and we're whole first. And so, yes, if you work with energy, energy becomes thought, thought becomes matter. That's what Randolph Stone says. And I tend to believe it's true. But I got to tell you, if there's a resistance to it, then there's something there about resistance. Resistance is good. There's no growth without it. And so we have a whole lot of, we do inquiry around resistance, like what's good about resistance, what's right about it, how does it serve you? And so, when someone says, okay, well, change your energy, and there's a lot of debris, I would call it debris or hard places, obscurations, gathered places that are like objects. That's been my job. People come to me, I have these patterns that repeat, these hard places, these things that bother me, my fixation of my thoughts, my obsessions and self, in the way I treat myself and others. And so I use all my skills, body work, energy work, inquiry,
Right.
and also a lot of facilitated awareness of your body, to shift the states. And then suddenly this thing that was bothering them is integrated, and then you can go, you can grow, and you can find your fullest expression of what it is you want to do here on planet Earth.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you one thing that I get quite a lot. I'm just kind of curious, asking an expert here. So when I'm doing my body work, and sometimes that includes craniosacral, and I've kind of developed my own style, I have to admit to that. I have people that they'll do the sucking motion with their mouths. They're like, sucking on a breast. And they're like
Rooting
40, 50,
reflex.
and I'm thinking, oh, that's good. I got them way back. But do you have any comment to that? Or, I'm just curious.
The rooting reflex, that if you're stimulating that, and that comes about, it could be that you're stimulating it for some reason, but if it shows up, then it wants to be integrated. If it's still there at the age of 40 or 50, it just wasn't given a chance to complete.
Right. So yes, that's.
So you just seek to integrate. That's what?
Oh yeah, we had a bit of a break in the internet. So you're saying that if it's there, it's because it wants to integrate, and that's what I felt. I felt like it kind of was integrating because these people were deep, and so that's interesting. Are you doing any classes internationally, or are you just teaching in Virginia? You get around?
Well, I teach online because of COVID now. I've moved just about everything online, and I'm hosting a lot of the pioneers to teach as well.
Great.
Ray Castellino and Wayne Emerson and Anna Chitty. And people can go and find out more about all those things. I teach a class called The Leading Edge, and I teach something called Integrated Prenatal and Perinatal Dynamics for practitioners. It's a 100-hour course. Actually, it's more than that. It's probably 130 hours.
Oh my God.
But yeah, it's a lot. A good training in this work would probably be about 54 days. So I don't even know how many hours that is, 700-800 hours.
Right.
So to integrate all that you really need to work in this field, it includes anatomy, it includes craniosacral therapy, working and also understanding trauma imprints, and then the pre and perinatal, all the things that happen for babies, and that's quite significant. And when I teach, I tell people it's complex. So it takes a while to learn, and to learn birth patterns, and to learn what happens in utero. That's what ignited my passion, was the intrauterine world, and what happens there. Because it's very it's not, there's mystery in
exactly. That's that. I feel mystery. I feel awe. I feel like you just you're really passionate about it, and I am. I knew within seconds of talking to you that I just had to have you and had to have you talk about it and spread it, because it's just wonderful.
Well, I'm really happy to be here and talk with you and tell you stories, and it was a pleasure to meet you and to know like you're in Bangkok, is that right?
Well, I'm actually in Payao, which is in the north of Thailand right now. I won't say I'm stranded, because I'm in a beautiful place, and I'm only doing online energy work sessions at the moment, because I can't do body work as well, and I'm writing a book, so I've got that going on. And I'm practicing. I'm doing a lot of my own practice, which is
good.
There's so much we can do to develop ourselves in these situations as well, isn't there?
Yeah, that's true. Well, you're right.
Thank you so much. I'm sure we'll be in touch, and
Yeah.
I would look forward to hearing what's going on. And let me know if I can help you to spread the love, as it were. And,
yeah, sure. Go ahead. I'll just keep it on your Facebook page. That's how I kind of communicate. And I would love to know more about you. So I'll go back and have a look at some of the things that you're teaching. And so interesting. Are you originally from England, or?
I'm originally from England, and I've been outside England since I was 24. So that's now more than half my life.
Yeah.
And I've just been on the wandering journey. And at the moment, I'm kind of feeling quite at home in Thailand. So we'll see. I just left Hong Kong. I was 12 years in Hong Kong. And I'm not sure if I'm going back, but I probably not for full time. But I do love Hong Kong. And I've got a great love for the Chinese culture, especially this Tai Chi and this deep wisdom that they have about energy and spirit, and which is, I'd say, I was very lucky to meet a teacher in 1989 in mainland China, and then if that wasn't a coincidence, like after I left China, like 3 years later, he didn't tell me he went to Germany, and I was in Germany, and I heard, and I invited him up, and then he stayed in my place for every time he came to Germany, he would stay in my place for about 17 years. And I was just incredibly lucky to meet him. And he would work with direct chi transfer. He would work with acupuncture, but he would feel the points. So he wouldn't take a pulse. He would just say, "Oh, there's the point," and you just go 1, 2, 3, and then he would work on the condition of the meridians, so how smooth the meridians were. So that's something I never heard of by anybody else. You would say, like, well, meridians themselves have a quality, and you can use acupuncture to help there be a greater flow in the meridians. And then he taught Tao. So he was teaching Tai Chi and Tao, which is a practice of no practice. It's like the Zen of the one that he was teaching was the Zen kind of Tao, which is there is no practice, because you're perfect already. So, but there needs to be a certain space that you give to that, and so that was called his practice. So although it's not a practice, it is a practice. So there's the polarity, see?
Yes, I get it.
I think we can draw a little line there, but I want to just thank you so much, and
you're welcome.
Look forward to hearing, and go to Discover Energy Work. Go and see what's going on there.
That's your website?
Well, Discover Energy Work on Facebook. I've had wonderful people on my podcast, and I think if you ever wanted to go to Hong Kong, or you wanted to share in Hong Kong in a class, I'm sure there'd be people there that would just be thrilled to host you.
Maybe after the things settle down a little bit.
Yeah, well, I've got to tell you, the sensationalism, when I was there, it was horrible. I will say I was living in Mongkok. I was looking down on some pretty horrific violence. And what I noticed is if you walk one street further, you're in just normal Hong Kong. So it really depends just where you go. But if you're in the wrong place, it's not fun. It really isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been watching the news, and it just seems like it's a little bit tough over there now.
Send love to Hong Kong, and
I
send love
will.
to there being peace and everyone finding peace in their own hearts. That's probably the most
Yeah.
useful thing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for your curiosity and your passion too, Richard. And I'll talk with you later, okay?